Well, if you're watching this in order, this is one of many different screencasts looking at significance testing and the chi-square test for independence. And we were looking specifically at some data from the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. You can see that on the screen right now. We were looking at the 8th grade student background questionnaire data from Saudi Arabia, from TIMSS in 2011. And this is what we have. We decided that the variables we were interested in were IT sex, which is simply the sex of students, was BSBG 03, which is how often do students report speaking the language of the test at home. And then all the way down at the bottom of the data set, we had an indicator of parents' highest education level, BSDG EDUP. And we decided that we would do a chi-square to see if the language of testing at home, how often someone speaks the language of testing at home, and parents' highest education level were associated using the chi-square test of independence. So to do that, we go to Analyze, and we go to Descriptive Statistics and Crosstabs. And I can see I was playing around with this a little bit earlier. We're going to be using the two variables we just mentioned. One was the no, not that one. One was this one, BSBG03, how often do you speak the language of the test at home? I'm going to put those in the, let's put those in the columns. And then I will put the parent's highest education level in the rows. Right? And then we're going to do a couple things. So we have now moved parents' highest education level into the rows, and the how often do students speak the language of the test at home into the columns. If you want to display clustered bar charts, which is always interesting, make sure that you check display clustered bar charts right down here, all right? And you'll end up with this kind of a screen. Now we're going to click on the Statistics button that's up here on the right-hand side. And we are going to select the chi-square. And we're also going to check the phi and Kramer's V. This will give us a strength of association measure for the chi-square. And then we'll click the Continue button. Now we're going to click the Cells button right here. And we'll get this pop up, and we will select that we want to have observed counts. You can see that here. If we wanted, we could have expected counts like we have done before. We can also have percentages for the row and the column and the total. So let's do all of those just to see what it looks like. And we'll click the Continue button. Finally, we're going to click the Format button, and we're going to be presented with this little table format option. We're going to use this to change the order of the values to either ascending or descending, depending on what we want to do. We can just leave it like this. It doesn't really matter for us. But if we wanted to, we could switch it to descending, because I think we know that parents' highest education level and language of the test at home are both ordered in a different way. Okay? And then we'll click OK, and it will generate our output. So here we go. Here's what we have. There it is. We have our crosstabs. It's going to be a cross-tabulation table that we see. It's a cross-tabulation table right here. Now this table will show us many different things. It shows us from low to high, how much parents' education students have in Saudi Arabia. It will show us also in the columns now, from left to right, from always to never, how often students speak the language of the test at home. And it will have our count, and then it will have our expected no relationship count. and it will have our percentage of parents' highest education level that falls within the always speak the language of the test at home. And you can see how that's associated. You'll see that it's very large, actually, 61%. Right? If we have a higher education level, university or higher, we see that it goes up even more for always speaks the language of the test at home. And so we're starting to get, just from looking at this, from eyeballing this chart, the idea that there is some association between parents' education level and speaking the language of the test at home, that the more education level, the more likely they are to speak the language of the test at their home. And if we look at our actual chi-square tests, we want to make sure that we look at all the different options, but in particular, we're interested in the Pearson chi-square. Right? That's what we just conducted. It has a value of 59.415, so that's our chi-square computed value. And we see that our p-value is less than 0.001. That is an extremely small probability of committing a type 1 error. So this tells us that there is a statistically significant association between parents' highest education level and the language of the test being spoken at home. Now, you'll remember from a previous screencast in this same series on chi-squares that I told you that we have to be careful of the difference between significance statistically and substantive significance. We have a statistically significant relationship here between these two categorical variables. But is it a substantive significant association? Well, our chi-square value actually at 59 is rather high. And so I think we can say, yes, we do have a significant and relatively strong association between our two categorical variables. That's actually pretty cool. For our phi and Kramer's v, these are both tests of the strength of association, and we can see that the Kramer's v is pretty small, and we can see that the phi is not that big either, although they're statistically significant. So that leads us to believe, even though we have a rather large chi-square, we still need to be careful in saying that this is a strong association. So if I was just looking at that 59, I'd say this is pretty good. We have a pretty strong association. But when we calculate these symmetric measures, the phi and the Kramer's v, we see that it's not as strong as perhaps we had hoped, or I had hoped. And then we have an interesting bar chart that we asked it to output for us. This bar chart makes it easier to visualize the data than reading the tables. And what it does is the clustered bar chart option allows a relevant graph to be produced that highlights the group categories and the frequency of counts in these groups. And you can see, as we noted, there is a fairly steady march up in the count for always speak the language of the test at home for the parents' education level, right? That goes up and up and up. So university is the highest level that we have. And when we look at the other categories, we see quite an interesting difference. And one in particular sort of throws us off, and it's this post-secondary but not university level. Now this is an interesting difference for us, and if perhaps we had some other type of measure here, or we dropped this out, we would see a stronger association. But it's in there, and I don't think that we want to take that out because that's a valid category for our measure of parents' highest education level. So we have now conducted a chi-square using SPSS. We have found that our two categorical variables are statistically and significantly related to one another using our chi-square test of independence. We've also found that although they're related and it's statistically significant, it may not be a strong relationship. In other words, our substantive significance might be somewhat questionable. we've seen that we can get a whole lot of extra data when we do these crosstabs in terms of our counts and our expected no relationship counts for each of the cells in the table. We could add in or take away as much of this percentage for each of the categories and each of these cells as we wanted to. We threw the kitchen sink into this one. That means we threw everything in that we thought we might want to look at. And you should be able at this point to conduct your own chi-square test for independence using SPSS and following the method that I showed you in the screencast. All right, I hope it's been helpful. I hope that you have a lot of fun doing chi-squares with SPSS and that you understand how to access the data even in TIMS as well.